all these people who call themselves left-wing, wouldn't know Marx if they tripped over him, if he was anywhere to be seen lying down, or one of his books. They're a lost cause. So they're absolutely a lost cause. But they're causing a lot of problems.
If you love the Gazans, why can you not condemn the barbarity and the cruelty by Hamas against the people of Gaza themselves?
When people say, anti-Semitism affects us all, that it really is true. Yeah, anti-Semitism really will drag us all down into the darkest place that humanity has ever been.
Who was it that actually leaked the information? Was it a police officer or was it a subcontractor working there? Do you know?
This young kid was punching Niak.
Yeah.
The stewards were not protecting him at all. The stewards were trying to pull his placard off him.
They were pulling his hair into the ground.
They were pulling his hair, exactly. And then eventually he got arrested. Niak and myself weren't allowed to speak to each other. We were not allowed to attend any protests relating to Israel or Gaza. And then also we were not allowed to enter Westminster. Standing near to us is a white woman who's saying, don't talk to the Zionists. Don't talk to the Zionists. Right, you laugh, quite rightly. It turns out she's their lecturer from university.
Oh my God. Welcome to another episode of You Decide. Today my guest is Mark Birbeck, who's the founder of the Our Fight campaigning group. Mark, as a first question, do you want to tell my subscribers what Our Fight is?
Sure.
And why you started it?
Sure, and thank you for having me on your podcast. So Our Fight was set up in the weeks following October the 7th, and the trigger for it really was obviously October the 7th itself, but more really the response to October the 7th, the kind of October the 9th response really. So on October the 9th, there was a vigil opposite Downing Street in Richmond Terrace, and David Lammy spoke, and there was all sorts of things going on. But I went along, I cleared my calendar for work, and I just thought I had to go there. I've got a number of Jewish friends, and I just felt like as the stories were coming out of what happened on October the 7th, I just felt I had to be there. Empathy, with my friends. But I naively thought that lots of other people would be there. So I naively thought that there would be a trade union banner or something. I imagined that there might be some left-wing groups, other people coming along to show solidarity. After at that point, people thought there were 1,400 people killed. It reduced
including
to 1,200.
Women and children.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was very clear the Nova Festival was a key part of this. So we were talking about not just attacks on bases. We were talking about people being killed in their beds in kibbutzim and, at the festival. So you would have thought that there would be people showing empathy, showing solidarity. And I went along to this vigil, and it was mainly young people, Israeli flags around their shoulders, candles being lit, playing guitar, lots of tears. There were young people whose friends were at Nova. I was talking to people who themselves should have been at Nova, but for various reasons didn't go. Lots of their parents, and that was it. It was Jews and Israelis who were there. So that kind of struck me anyway. So that I didn't think,
where's everyone else?
Exactly,
yeah.
Where is everybody else? But then when I got home that evening, I discovered where everybody else was. I don't know if you remember, but outside the Israeli embassy, there was a party going on. People were letting off flares, people were cheering. There were lots of young people sort of forming up. They had Socialist Worker Party and Palestine Solidarity Campaign somehow managed to get placards out pretty quickly.
Was this a larger group than the
enormous? Yeah, it was enormous. And
so you had a small vigil of mainly Israeli and Jewish people that were mourning the atrocity that happened, and then you had this much larger group that were actually celebrating innocent people, babies, grandmothers, women being kidnapped and killed.
Absolutely. And that was a global phenomenon as well, if you remember. So you remember the things like outside Sydney Opera House, people saying "gas the Jews." This was happening all over. There was this feeling that this was some kind of liberation, some breaking out. We all remember the quotes from the academics at the universities saying, this is a bid for freedom. What did you think that decolonization looked like? That kind of thing. So that was the really striking thing. And then over the following weeks, I then started to go to more vigils. There was a vigil in Parliament Square, there was a vigil in Trafalgar Square, and it was the same story. And not only that, you then started to have the big marches in London. You remember the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, 100,000 people marching, lots of anti-Semitic placards, and just this general feeling, you mentioned the word mourning, just this general feeling that the thing that kept striking me is that surely no matter where you stand on the politics of it, you can allow people to mourn.
Yeah.
That was this overriding feeling that I kept getting, that surely, if we are civilized people, even if you go to war, you don't dance on the graves of your enemy. You recognize that maybe it had to be done, but so that was the overriding feeling I had, that where is the empathy? This is shocking. So I wrote an article on that for Spiked, actually, sort of collecting my thoughts. And then there was a particular vigil in Trafalgar Square where Michael Gove spoke. He did a very good speech. Quite a lot of my friends were there, sort of just popped up. We went for a drink in the pub afterwards, and the idea for a campaign started to form. And the feeling we had was this feeling of lack of empathy, but also this feeling that non-Jews needed to step up. This feeling that, if there was going to be a difference made, we had a responsibility. And a lot of my friends who weren't Jewish, when I say weren't, they still aren't,
You're not Jewish yourself, are you?
No, I'm not Jewish, no. A lot of my friends just felt like, we need to do something. Mm-hmm. So the campaign then started to form.
And what did you want to achieve through the campaign?
So initially the idea was to challenge anti-Semitism.
Right.
I'd long had this feeling that anti-Semitism is probably the most dangerous idea that humans have created.
I remember watching one of your previous podcasts, and you mentioned a quote saying that anti-Semitism is the start of totalitarian regime, or something to that effect. What was the exact quote? Can you remind me?
Well, it wasn't so much a quote. What I was probably describing was Hannah Arendt's book on totalitarianism. So Hannah Arendt, I'm sure you know, she's the person who's famous for the Eichmann in Jerusalem, the famous quote of the banality of evil. She coined that when she was a journalist covering the Eichmann trial. But she also wrote probably one of her most famous books is called On Totalitarianism. And I remember reading this some years ago, and I was really struck by the structure of the book. So the structure of the book is the first chapter, or the first section rather, is on anti-Semitism. Second section is on imperialism, and then the third section is on totalitarianism. And it's kind of, it's a bit of a flip to how you would normally think about it, because you would normally sort of think, the Nazis, they were terrible people, they hated everybody, they were nationalists, they hated, Jews, they hated Poles, they just hated everybody, kind of thing. But what she does is she explains it the other way around, and she says that it was anti-Semitism that allowed the Nazis to rise to power, which is a very different model. And then once you start thinking of it that way around, you start to think, okay, well, anti-Semitism, when people say, anti-Semitism affects us all, that it really is true. Anti-Semitism really will drag us all down into the darkest place that humanity has ever been, which is, of course, the Holocaust.
So you were saying you started the campaign to fight against anti-Semitism to begin with, and then did that morph into something bigger? Or?
It's not so much something bigger, but what we realised through the course of campaigning, this was in days and weeks, really. This wasn't like a revelation that took a year or anything. It took very quickly, especially with the marches. We realised that to challenge anti-Semitism today, in the modern era, means to challenge anti-Zionism. So we realised that we had to stand with Israel. So our three kind of tenets that we have on our website and on our leaflets are that we stand with Israel, we stand against anti-Semitism, and we stand for free speech. And so that very quickly we but very quickly we realised that you needed to be very forthright standing with Israel. You couldn't mince your words. You couldn't go around saying, I'm against anti-Semitism But also I'm against Israel because it's just it's a losing battle.
And your own background, I mean, before you started this Our Fight campaign group, you were a software developer, yeah? I've seen one of your videos on YouTube when you were much younger and you were giving a presentation or something about some software program.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I did used to speak at conferences and do tech talks and things like that. That's very true.
So job-wise, you had a technical job. You had you were in IT. You were a bit of a gig, sort of technical gig type of thing.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But also your political background. What was your political background?
So I guess using these old words to probably help people orient themselves, because obviously I think we agree a lot of these words mean nothing nowadays. But in the past, you would have said left. In fact, you'd have said very extreme left. I was part of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which, and I argue with people like Maya Tuzi, they kind of, because they all have this idea of the Marxists are the people that are ruining the planet. And what they don't really understand is that all these people who call themselves left-wing, wouldn't know Marx if they tripped over him, if he was anywhere to be seen lying down, or one of his books. So I would say the thread, the continuum, the continuum, the thread that joins me today to me in the past is what I would say is a humanist. I believe that people are capable of making decisions. A bit of a J.D. Vance on trust the demos, trust people to be involved on lots of issues where you might have thought I would be the other side, things like Brexit. I was on the side that traditionally people would have said is the right, but I was on that side because I believed in democracy. Who knows which is better, being in the EU or out? I don't know. You're going to do all the sums and all the rest of it. But what I truly believed was that ordinary people should have a say in that process. So I'm a Democrat. I'd say a humanist, and that's why I was a lefty back in the day, and that's why now I'm campaigning against anti-Semitism. And
that's the unusual thing, isn't it? Because most of the people from a left-wing background, they're actually very, very anti-Israeli, and which has always puzzles me, because Israel was founded by pioneers who were mostly socialist European Jews that went to build Israel, and there's a lot of socialist fingerprints into Israel, the kibbutzes, and yet the left in the West is so anti-Israeli. Why is that? Why are they so anti-Israeli?
My view is that it's an evolution, and it's the decolonization movement. I think it's the anti-imperialist movement, which has become what they would call anti-imperialist, has become this anti-Western movement, anti-civilizational movement, and effectively they're opposed to anything that represents civilization or civilizational values, and what I would call progressive humanist values. So they're against nation, they're against family. They're against armies, of course, and all of those things you'll see writ large in Israel. Israel is forced to defend itself against Islamism, so it has a nation of ordinary people who are in the army. It has to send its sons and daughters to fight for them, to defend these values, everything which is anathema to what the left stands for. And I think, coming back to Hannah Arendt, it's interesting because when she talked about anti-Semitism in her book on totalitarianism, she talks about anti-Semitism as being this kind of like a proxy, where what happens over the years is that Jews unfortunately get caught in between, caught in the middle of a fight. They become a proxy, they become a symbol for the actual fight. So you get, I don't know, if you're anti-monarch, in the 19th century, you would end up being anti-Jew. If you're anti-capitalist, you'd end up being anti-Jew. And now I think what's happened is if you're anti-modernity, if you're anti-civilization, if you're anti-nation, if you're anti-family, anti-war, armies, then you end up attacking Jews, or in the current model, Zionists.
So they're so preoccupied with being against Western values that they're willing to go to bed with anyone. But wasn't it Marx himself that has got that famous quote that religion is the opiate of the masses? And then yet they go to bed with Islamists, which is the worst kind of religious extremism. And if you like, I always call them the far right, the real far right. And this is exactly the same mistake that the left made in Iran. And it's just being repeated over and over again. Is there, when you talk to people that you know from your previous background and you explain these things, what do they say? How do they justify going to bed with far right Islamic extremists?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, most people won't discuss things nowadays. So it's kind of...
people like to label each other nowadays. You don't have a debate anymore, do you?
You won't
just want to throw labels at each other.
Yeah, you won't get a discussion. I mean, there's a video I did, it's on Instagram, where I go up to the socialist worker stall and I start trying to talk to this young man, and he completely stands there, and I say, why is it that, exactly as you've just described, why is it that you're getting into bed with the Islamists? Silence. Completely ignores me, stands there.
I've got exactly similar videos on my YouTube channel where I'm going up to their stall. They don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm being civilized. I just want to have a debate. I really want to know their point of view. Yeah. But they just don't want to discuss it.
Yeah. So my view for a while now is that they're a lost cause. Yeah. So they're absolutely a lost cause. But they're causing a lot of problems.
Yeah.
You're saying they're getting into bed with the far right. I would say that, to all intents and purposes, they are the far right now. I mean, they shut down debate. We've been attacked many times on counter-protests by these people. Socialist Workers' Party, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Stand Up to Racism, all of these groups, they're all the same people.
They just go
Jeremy
all different
Corbyn's
causes.
goons. Yeah, exactly.
It's always the same lot in different protests, whether it's Black Lives Matter or environmental issues or Palestine. They're all the same people.
Absolutely, and they shut things down. They won't let you into their debates, for example. They'll move you on if you're outside with a banner. They're very old school. What's fascinating, I don't know if you want to talk about this at this point here. What's fascinating is in the last 16 months, the only discussions I've had with people on the street, I've had lots of discussions, obviously, privately, but on the street have been with young Muslim men.
They're more willing to discuss.
They're more willing to discuss. They're more informed. So I've met kids from Somalia or family from Somalia. I met a kid from Lebanon, and they're kind of tough. There's a video from last Saturday where I'm arguing with this young man who began by calling us Zionist pigs. So he's standing there with his keffiyeh around his head, calling us Zionist pigs. But
keffiyeh is that probably made in China by Uyghur Muslim,
absolutely,
cheap labour,
yeah, exactly. But he gets into a discussion, and we argue for an hour or so. Never had that with any of these so-called progressives, so-called lefties. In fact, the worst. This gives to me this anecdote sums up the whole situation. We were in Parliament Square one day. We were doing a counter-protest against a big banner. There's a big banner saying "Stop the genocide." We have a banner that says there is no genocide in Gaza. So we're counter-protesting, and we get talking to these young men, and they've come from the university in East London. They're young Muslim men. One of them's Somalian. One of them says his family come from Gaza. So we're arguing away about Islamism, about all sorts of things. Standing near to us is a white woman who's saying, "Don't talk to the Zionists. Don't talk to the Zionists." Right? You laugh, quite rightly. It turns out she's their lecturer from university.
Oh my God.
She has brought them over to the first protest, the Stop the Genocide outside Parliament, and there she's trying to drag them away. And these kids are saying, "No, miss, we'll talk. We're talking. So it is fascinating, all these dynamics. There's so many directions you can go with that. I think the left is a lost cause. I think talking to these young kids, they're thirsty for knowledge and they're thirsty for argument. I'm not naive. They're not going to suddenly support us and say, okay, I agree now, I understand. But the fact that they want to engage shows that we're really letting them down if we don't give them dialogue and discussion.
So counter-protest has been a large part of Our Fight campaign group. What's happened in these counter-protests? What's been the police's attitude? Have you been arrested?
Once, yes, I've been arrested once, yeah.
Do you want to tell us why the police arrested you? Because I don't see you as a violent person that wants to go there causing trouble. You just want to have a debate and talk to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what you should do in a democracy. So why did the police arrest you?
On that particular occasion, when I was arrested, I was with Niak Gorbani, who your
friend of mine,
subscribers, friend of yours, and your subscribers will probably know him from the Hamas terrorist posters.
I also posted that video of him being beaten up by the Refugees Are Welcome mob.
Yes.
Him being a refugee himself.
Exactly.
So that's had about 100,000 views. So, so my subscribers should be familiar with him.
Good. Well, I was also attacked on that same event.
Right.
Okay, so this is a good example of what we're talking about when we say that they are the right. They are the right now. Because we turned up at that event with placards. I don't know how visible in your video they are. They probably are. But in the video, we turned up with placards that said, described our background individually, and then maybe had a flag on, and then said, "Are we welcome?" Because they had this idea that everybody's welcome.
Yeah.
So as you rightly said, Niak had a placard that said, "I'm an Iranian refugee." It might have said, "Thank you, Britain, for taking me in," like he always says.
And he had an England flag around him.
Yeah, and then it says, "Am I welcome?" For mine, it says, "I'm a lefty Brit. I stand with Israel against Islamism. Am I welcome?" With the Israeli flag. Now, on a previous event, I was spat on for that, for having that Israeli flag. On this event, one of their goons grabbed the poster, sort of disappeared with it. I went to try and get it, and about 6 or 7 people jumped on me, got me to the ground, and then the police had to come in. Well, I say had to come in. They didn't come in to rescue me. They came and escorted me away. They didn't arrest me. With Niak, it was much worse. Niak was much worse. This young kid was punching Niak.
Yeah.
The stewards were not protecting him at all. The stewards were trying to pull his placard off him.
They were pulling his hair into the ground.
They were pulling his hair, exactly. And then eventually he got arrested. He was arrested.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Here's a refugee being attacked by Refugees Are Welcome mob, and the police arrest him for getting beaten up.
Absolutely. So, but having said that, there are occasions where the police have been pretty good. So we stopped the march. Our kind of way of operating is we stop their march because we feel we can't let them get away with their message. Which is to say, Israel's committing a genocide, and they don't mention Hamas, they don't mention anything that is really happening. They just have this idea of Israel baby killers, that kind of thing. So our view is we're going to stop that. We're going to make our statement. And on the occasion when I got arrested with Niak, we were both standing there. We stopped the march, and the police just overreacted. But on other occasions, we've stopped the march. The police have said, okay, how long are you going to be here, kind of thing. We, haggle, negotiate, and then we get moved to the side, and then the march carries on. So
on the occasion that you were arrested, how long were you kept in the police station, in police custody?
Overnight.
So
released about 6 o'clock in the morning. So that would be, 18 hours, something like that.
So the maximum they can keep you is 24 hours. They kept you in there for 18 hours. I was kept for 11 hours, so you were kept more than me.
Yeah.
And then what happened? Were you charged?
So that's the interesting thing. They have this thing called pre-charge now. They used to have, I didn't know about this until my arrest, but they used to have what they called released under investigation, RUI. But apparently what used to happen is the police would release you under investigation and then nothing would happen for ages. So, I don't know, a local criminal his bail conditions would be that he couldn't go into a certain block of flats or something like that, and then he would be RUI for 5 years or something and never charged. So the police used to use it in that way. So apparently it changed, the law was changed by the Tories at some point. So you have this thing called pre-charge, which is only supposed to last 3 months. They're supposed to have 3 months and then they have to charge you. If they don't charge you, that's usually like you're a terrorist or something like that. It's usually pretty extreme if you don't get charged. So they usually drop the charges. I've now had twice, they've deferred it. So I guess, I don't know, I'm probably more dangerous than my friends
So this
think
is
I
still
am.
hanging over your shoulder. You don't know whether you're going to be charged or you're not going to be charged.
Absolutely. And I've got
And you've got a bail condition.
No, the bail conditions have been lifted.
You went to a first trial hearing,
Uh, we-
and the magistrates lifted the bail condition.
Yes, that's right. So we had these bail conditions where NIAC and myself weren't allowed to speak to each other. We were not allowed to attend any protests relating to Israel or Gaza. And then also we were not allowed to enter Westminster if such a protest was taking place. So it was all very, very stringent.
So this bail condition was lifted, but you still don't know if you're going to be charged or not.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I've got 2 counts of assaulting an emergency worker, which is basically a police officer.
What happened there?
Hanging.
Can we talk about that? Or?
I don't know, actually. But yeah, apparently, whilst I had the handcuffs behind my back, being handcuffed lying on the floor, apparently I bent this officer's thumb. Yeah. And what's hilarious, what makes me laugh is that when you could see the 2 policemen talking to each other, and one of them was saying to the other, "Look, this is what happened." And the more senior copper, you could see him raise an eyebrow and say, "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" And he said, "Yeah," nodded, "Yeah." So
this is the other strange thing about this whole situation. So we have a situation where Hamas is a UK government prescribed terrorist group.
Yeah.
That means you mustn't do any sympathy with them. You mustn't do any propaganda for them. And basically, you go in there reminding people that Hamas is a terrorist group, and the police arrest you. It doesn't make sense. Shouldn't the police be on your side, or at least impartial? Why have they got it in for you? Or why did they have it in for me?
Well, I do wonder whether they've improved, though. So, again, I don't want to be naive about it, but I think, well, I say they've improved, but I've just given an example a week ago when NIAC was arrested. But I think the things keep moving. So I don't think we would get arrested for holding the Hamas a terrorist posters anymore. Yeah.
They've learned their lesson, at least.
They've learned that, exactly.
Yeah.
So they've learned their lesson. On the first occasion when NIAC was arrested and de-arrested, they screwed up his poster, they threw it in the bin, all this kind of thing. But then, you probably remember, there were cartoons across the globe. People were referring to NIAC's arrest. It was covered widely. So I think they kind of realised that they
gave a bad image of the country, really, worldwide, saying like how stupid things are in the UK.
Yeah.
And there was that other video about these 2 coppers that were saying, they thought Nasrallah was the leader of Lebanon for a start, and then they didn't. They were saying like, well, we can't say if Hezbollah is a terrorist group; it's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
They had no idea that Hezbollah was also a prescribed terrorist group.
Yeah.
I mean.
But now what's happened? Sorry but what's happening now though is they're making mistakes in different areas. So one of the things that they do a lot now is Section 14. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically, if you organise a march now, you have to tell the police as part of the Public Order Act, and then they will impose conditions on you. So when the Palestine Solidarity Campaign marched, the police will say, okay, you can march from the BBC maybe, down to Parliament Square, and Section 12 says you must follow this route. You can't deviate from this route, and you must be finished by 5 o'clock, and that kind of thing. There's also another rule, which is Section 14, which is used for static protests. So if the Stop the Hate group, for example, sets up a counter-protest, like the one you were arrested at in Piccadilly Circus, the police will say, okay, you can be there, we'll set up some barriers, but you must not deviate, you must not move from that area. And that's Section 14. Now, what happens with us frequently with our fight, because we don't tell the police we're coming, we don't tell anyone we're coming because we want to stop the march. They're hardly going to, we can't say, we'll be by the horses in Piccadilly Circus at the Haymarket at 1:30 because the police are not going to let us anywhere near. So we don't tell anyone we're coming, which is our right. We're entitled to do that. That's the law. We're allowed to protest. But what they try to do is they say, no. You're part of Stop the Hate. You are subject to Section 14, so now we're going to arrest you. So that's happened frequently where we've had to really push back and really fight not to be arrested. And at the refugee example that you gave earlier, that's what NIAC was arrested for. They tried to say, no, you're part of the Tommy Robinson march up the road. which obviously we had nothing to do with it. We were there to counter-protest against the anti-racists. But he was arrested under Section 14. They said, no, you're part of the Tommy Robinson March. You've broken the Section 14 conditions. We're now arresting you. So they got it wrong again.
And there's also that other case of you, Mahyar and Niak were the three people where your personal information was given out by someone in the police station. What's the latest on that? The police have now admitted that it was their fault. Who was it that actually leaked the information? Was it a police officer or was it a subcontractor working there? Do you know?
I don't know, and I don't think they've released that. They've said that somebody has been suspended, but I don't think they've said anything about...
What sort of information was it exactly? I know it was personal information. Was it just like where you lived and your address and phone number?
No, it was just names. It was just names, but for some people, the full name being out there is obviously an issue. So yeah, but it was just names. But it was more the fact that somebody even took the trouble to take a screenshot off the screen.
And then where did they release it to?
Twitter. Yeah.
So someone in the police station took a screenshot of the information, which should only be for police use only.
Yeah.
And they posted it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the police now admit that this mistake has been made.
Yeah.
Have they arrested anyone?
Don't know. They're saying, we'll keep you updated every 3 or 4 weeks. So it's
which police station are we talking about here?
Don't know. Right. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think our lawyers know. Or
this is terrible.
It is particularly for Maya and Niak, because obviously I'm wary of the Islamist threat in Britain, but I'm not as wary as, for example, Iranians are. And I know that particularly Niak has had some real trouble from Iranian IRGC members, proper physical violence, So, this kind of thing is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, there was an article, I think, in the in the Daily Mail, I think, that said that the UK police are just not able to protect Iranian dissidents. And then, right from I remember in one of your speeches, you mentioned the Iranians in the UK, that they've been on, with your campaign right from day one. And you say that they get it. Why do you think that is? Why is it that of all the people, especially in the Middle East, the Iranian community living in UK have largely stood by Israel? Why is that? What do you think is different about people like me with Iranian background?
Yeah, I wonder. Something in the water? I don't know. Something in the... I think
the diet?
Yeah, you have a kind of left tradition which hasn't gone towards the Islamists. And that I would recognise more, that kind of humanist sort of element. There is a sort of element of freedom, poetry, the arts. There's that kind of. There's a cultural sense.
I think it's because we've seen the Islamists take over. We've experienced it. We know how serious it is. We know how quickly it can get out of hand.
Yes.
And whenever we hear it will never happen here, this is exactly what we used to hear in Iran.
Absolutely.
And then so if we hear it again, just alarm bells start ringing because...
Well, what I mean is that you don't... Because you could respond to that by just putting your head in the sand and saying, being conservative. So what I mean is that there's this kind of aspiration for something, for a better world. So people like Niak take risks, and he really is not concerned, maybe he should be more, but he's not concerned about his personal safety. He has this idea of something bigger. Yeah. So that's what I meant by there's some kind of... it's not just a response to the Islamists, pulling the wool over the left's eyes. There's something bigger there. Yeah. I think there's also something about the role of the refugee, the outsider. Particularly for me personally, I've been very influenced by working with Iranians and particularly refugees, because you kind of come here and you see Britain from the outside. And Niak will say to me, well, why aren't you proud of your flag? So as an old lefty, you were asking me earlier.
Why are you shy about being a patriot? What's wrong with patriotism?
Exactly. Yeah. So that was a big thing for me. Yeah. To sort of say, oh well, yeah, maybe he's right. Actually, maybe it is time to start sticking up for the warts and all, Britain. say, okay, we accept that this happened in the past. We weren't so great here, but at the end of the day, we're all in this together. Let's see what we can do to try and make for a better place.
And it's something that you said in one of your previous speeches that struck a chord with me. You called this a battle for civilization. It's not just a fight between Israel and a extreme religious terrorist group called Hamas. This is really a battle between fundamental freedoms and that totalitarian thing, which is something that we've experienced before, and we see it happening again, and we know which side is the right side of the history, whereas unfortunately these young kids in the universities being brainwashed by their peers and lecturers don't seem to understand. Now, let's talk a little bit more about more recent news. So we had this tragic case of the Bibas family. I mean, we also saw the footage of Shiri, the mother, who was trying to protect her 10-month-old baby and 4-month-old baby when they've been taken, kidnapped as hostages. We were all hoping that they would return alive and well. The father has returned, but he's lost his wife, he's lost his family. And I think even her parents were killed. I heard, I'm not sure if it's true, but the footage that shows her shielding her kids as they're being kidnapped was after her parents were killed.
Yeah, I believe so.
But I mean, regardless, a mother and 2 babies were kidnapped. I mean, for me, no liberation movement, no freedom fighter would ever kidnap a 10-month-old baby and the mother. I mean, you know, we had these countries during the Soviet years, you know, they were under oppression, they were under occupation by the Soviet Union. You know, they didn't resort to tactics like that. They didn't go into Russia and kidnap Russian babies and mothers and all that. So for me, this is just such an obvious thing that this is an outright brutal terrorist group. Nothing to do with fight for freedom, nothing to do with resistance. You know, they're outright terrorists. And yet still some people don't get it. And even when 2 babies and a mother are brutally kidnapped, kept captive and killed, they're still silent. There's no condemnation. I'm talking about major public figures. I'm talking about Gary Lineker's. I'm talking about Rory Stewart's. I'm talking about Jeremy Corbyn's. I've been watching their Twitter. Nothing. How much more callous can they get?
I think you're right. I think this is why your point earlier about it being a civilizational struggle. For me, that's the aspect. As you were saying a moment ago about it being a civilizational struggle, I think you're absolutely right. But it's not. See, often people say that, and they say it in relation to Hamas, Israel, Gaza, the front line. So Israel is on the front line of this battle, and all of the things you describe, the atrocities, the fact that they can, kidnap babies and their mother and then kill them in cold blood. So absolutely, that's a civilizational battle. But the more important civilizational battle in some ways is the one that we're experiencing here, as you describe, where we've just lost this empathy. Back to, you asked me how Our Fight was formed and why. It's that lack of empathy. It's that belief that somehow if you concede anything about these 2 babies being killed by Hamas, you've effectively gone along with propaganda about Israel. And that'll be why the Linekers and the Corbyns and the people like that are silent, because they haven't even got the sophistication to say, well, look, I support a state for the Palestinian people. As it happens, I do. I'm a 2-state person. People call me naive, people laugh at me and say, I don't see...
But it doesn't mean that you stay silent when babies are being kidnapped and taken hostage and killed.
Exactly. Yeah. And they lack that sophistication. They're kind of going
that moral courage, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Despite all their virtue signalling and all that, they really lack the moral courage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, what happens is they're contributing, back to the earlier part of our discussion, they're contributing to the rise of anti-Semitism. Because if all people hear all the time is what Israel does, they bombed this block of flats. Well, we don't know why. That's why we stand there. That's why NIAC is right to stand there with Hamas terrorist posters, because we're reminding people they didn't bomb the block of flats because they love to see the blood of Palestinians and Gazans. They bombed the block of flats because Hamas were hiding there, or 20,000 rockets were fired, or or the kidnap. They've got hostages. There's context. There's a context to why these things are happening, and they're trying to. I suspect. It's not just the moral aspect that we've talked about. I suspect that they feel that it would weaken the cause if they were to concede anything that Israel does as being justified. They feel it would weaken their cause, which is why we have to do the opposite. We have to keep reminding them, keep reminding people. 2 babies murdered. I mean, it's just shocking.
Yeah, you're now fully involved as a full time. On this Our Fight, you've given up your IT career, yeah. We're now 17 months after the 7th of October. Where is the campaign now, and what's the future for it?
Yes, you're right. So I guess I can say I'm no longer a geek, as you said earlier.
You don't look like a geek, but anyone who's in IT, I always call them a geek.
Yeah, no, it's true. We are all geeks, yeah, I think what you'll see. So I went to an interesting presentation last year where the CST were reporting on anti-Semitic attacks incidents, and they showed a chart of the ebb and flow, the rise and fall of these attacks, and you could see how they corresponded largely with phases of the war, phases of Israel's relation. Or even the Intifada, in fact, as it happens, the 2 Intifadas, you'd find there'd be more anti-Semitic attacks in Britain, even when Israel's defending itself, like it was after October the 7th. But one of the striking things about that chart is that it never goes back down to where it was. Yeah, it may ease off, so probably the numbers are easing off now as the war. We've got a ceasefire, this kind of thing. But it will never go back to a low. Next time anything happens, next time Israel is attacked by somebody and has to defend itself, you can be pretty sure that anti-Semitic attacks will go even higher. So I feel part of the reason that I did give up my job is that I feel like we need to build a campaign that is directed at non-Jews to convince them that anti-Semitism is this scourge, is this dark idea that can take us to the lowest point, as Arendt talks about, and we need to get on with it, because there will be a point, if we don't get it done over the next year or 2, then the next time round will be even worse. So these marches that we saw going through London with placards saying Netanyahu is worse than Hitler, this kind of thing, it's going to be much, much worse. One of the measures of that is how quickly the idea of the Holocaust has been rewritten. So I went to Hyde Park Corner yesterday to back up a young activist called Sammy. You should put his Instagram and everything in the show notes, because
I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, so he basically went to Speaker's Corner, very feisty, basically saying Zionism is our right, and everyone arguing with him backwards and forwards, lots of toing and froing. But this guy comes up and just basically, nobody had mentioned the Holocaust at this point. This guy comes up and says, "We're fed up of you people." Obviously, I'm not Jewish, but what does he care? We're fed up of you people weaponizing the Holocaust. You're using the Holocaust to justify, what Israel's doing. And I thought it was really striking that nobody had even mentioned it at that point. This woman then came up next to him and started saying, "Yeah, we're fed up with anti-Semitism being used to justify." So I look at that and I think, well, if we lose the element of the Holocaust being an illustration of where anti-Semitism leads, and instead it's just an illustration of where any prejudice can lead, racism, not liking the look of another person, thinking, being against refugees even, people are sort of reducing it to that level of banality, then we've lost any measure of where anti-Semitism can lead. And so anti-Semitism just becomes just another thing of no import. So that was the shocking thing yesterday, where this guy was just prepared to dismiss the Holocaust as this education, as this lesson. And so I feel that the campaign, if we can do anything over the next couple of years to put the Holocaust back into its rightful place, then I think that's something that Our Fight should be doing.
Yeah.
So for Holocaust Memorial Day next year, we need to make sure that we don't have people organising vigils for all genocides, which is what happened this year. In Parliament Square, there was a vigil for all genocides. Cambodia, Bosnia, and like I say, that means you've lost the element of anti-Semitism to.
And another reference point for me with regards to gauging whether something is a genuine liberation movement or not is, apart from how they treat the enemy, is also how they treat their own people. Mm-hmm. And there's been loads of videos coming from Gaza about the way Hamas are treating their own people, how brutally they beat up the Gazans, how they kneecap their own citizens. And yet even these videos haven't made this activist class batter an eyelid, have they? I mean, they're even silent about Hamas's cruelty to their own people. Okay, you want to hate the Jews, okay, but if you love the Gazans, why can you not condemn the barbarity and the cruelty by Hamas against the people of Gaza themselves?
Well, I think it's back to what we were talking about before. Anything is justified if it's against Western civilization, if it's against imperialism, if it's against the nation. They will say that they should be able to fight back using whatever means necessary. I was at Swiss Cottage the other night, and there was a protest there against the Israeli ambassador who lives up there, and it's been going on for months and months. And they're quoting Malcolm X, and it's all this same kind of thing that just trips off the tongue. They'll dismiss all this kneecapping. That'll be nothing to these people. Yeah.
Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Mark. I could talk to you for hours. Maybe I can have you another time for as more news develop and that. The most immediate thing in your campaign, you're organising for a symposium.
Well, we had a symposium a week or so ago.
Right.
So I'd urge your subscribers to go and watch that. It's all available on our YouTube
This is the
channel.
one at JW3?
Exactly.
Where I asked the question as well.
You did?
Yeah. I watched it the other day, actually. I definitely recommend that.
Yes, and Brendan O'Neill was great.
Can I cut that clip and post it on my YouTube?
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Please do. Yeah.
But
Brendan O'Neill spoke in the final plenary.
It was brilliant. Absolutely
and
brilliant.
Jonathan
Spot on.
Sacerdotti did the opening lecture.
I missed that one.
Oh, okay. Well, you can watch it online as well. And then there was a great session in the middle on the arts, where we had some really good speakers and some great anecdotes and things about how the arts have failed, really, in the representation of the Holocaust. So this whole theme of the Holocaust is what we want to focus on this year. It's the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz this year. So we want to kind of keep that as the theme about people talk about the de-Judification of the Holocaust. That's what we're fighting back against, removing the element of the Jews from the final solution. It doesn't make any sense. You can't understand the Holocaust and the Second World War even without understanding anti-Semitism. So part of that is that we're organising a trip to Israel at the end of April. So we want to be in Israel for Holocaust Memorial Day, the Israeli version, Yom HaShoah, and as a solidarity trip. We want to get a bunch of non-Jews, Brits, go over there, meet people, talk to people, get stories to bring back to Britain, but also take a message of solidarity with us over there.
But actually, Mark, I'd like to finish this talk by talking about you yourself, because you've made the big sacrifice. You had a good career, good IT career, good income. You've given all that up, and you're fully involved with this. And from what I know about IT, if you leave it for a while, it's hard to get back into it because it changes so fast and you just fall behind. What do you envisage for yourself in the future? I mean, at some point, are you going to carry on with this forever? At some point, are you going to give up? What's the plan B for Mark Birbeck?
Did my wife sent that question in? Is that
I did read about your wife being a lecturer.
she used to be in academia. Yeah.
But no, I've never talked to her.
So, well, I haven't really thought about it long term because I feel so motivated that we need to create an organisation that's able to challenge anti-Semitism from a non-Jewish perspective, or rather to encourage non-Jews. So I do feel that it's an urgent task. I do feel the broader position we're in, as you quite rightly said earlier about this civilizational struggle, I do feel that strongly as well. Some people pick up different issues within that. Melanie Phillips, for example, is writing about the restoration of a Judeo-Christian tradition as her way. Some people see Islamism as the key battleground. All of those things I think are interesting and important, but for me, anti-Semitism is probably the key idea that we need to challenge. So I do feel a sense of urgency. Whether I get this campaign running and then in a couple of years' time I can go off and be a geek again, I don't know. But certainly at the moment I feel, because I look at the landscape and there are lots of fantastic organisations like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, there's the Christian Action Against Anti-Semitism, there's lots of campaigns that tend to have either a Jewish membership or a Christian Zionist membership, and that's all fantastic. But I think we need to go out there and we need to say to you were talking earlier about how you were involved in the Anti-Nazi League. There must be thousands of people out there who used to be involved in these campaigns who feel alienated from the current left. They don't recognise themselves in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They certainly don't recognise themselves in the Socialist Workers' Party. What are they doing? I want to make it so that come next Holocaust Memorial Day, these people stand up. And if somebody says, right, in our local library, we're going to have a little display here for all the different genocides, I want them to respond to that and say, no, the Holocaust is the Holocaust. It's the lowest point humanity reached, and it was because of anti-Semitism. And we need to push back. So those are the people I want to reach. So I think we need a new organisation to do that, and that's why I set this campaign up.
Well, I wish you all the best, and I wish there were more people like you. I'll leave links to your website, YouTube channel, social media in the description. Please have a look at it and support Mark if you can. Thank you very much, Mark, for
Thank you.
coming.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks a lot.